Bloomberg Tech is live from coast to coast with Caroline Hyde in New York and Ed Ludlow in San Francisco.
This is Bloomberg Tech. Coming up, all eyes on Nvidia as the chipmaker reports earnings after the closing bell. What to expect from the world's most valuable company throughout this hour. Plus, SpaceX's Starship hits a major milestone after deploying satellites in space for the first time. And IBM and AMD partner up to develop quantum-centric supercomputing. We'll discuss with IBM's quantum VP, but first, we check in on these markets. And actually, we just check in on the world's most valuable company. We check in one that dominates the S&P to the tune of 8%. I'm looking at a 10% higher for Nvidia. We are just 1 percentage point away from a new record high for this company. Will it get there? After the closing bell, after the market shut in that post-hours movement, we could see whiplash of up to 6% either direction, according to the options market. I'm looking at the weightings because this is why we focus on this company. This is why it's basically our Super Bowl today. 8% of the S&P 500. We're 24% of the tech sector within that S&P. The Nasdaq 100, now we're seeing Nvidia make up 10% of the weighting. And so therefore we go to a man that has covered this stock before you and I could pronounce Nvidia properly. It is the one and only Ian King. It's your Super Bowl tonight, Ian. And just so many questions remain about the forecast. It feels that there is where the guide is going to be keenly watched.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I mean, historically, Nvidia doesn't just have to beat on its forecast and project a rosy future. It has to blow past it and give Wall Street a sense that this never-ending surge is coming. And as we've seen with Carmen's story, things are very unclear this time. We really don't know how much China is going to be in that forecast, how much China can be in that forecast, and that's really the wild card this time.
It is. We're going to have to hear from Jensen not only about H20, but where he guides in terms of a B30, the latest development of the Blackwell architecture that maybe gets sign-off to be sold to China. But more broadly, are we hearing enough from the hyperscalers that the commitment is there? We were expecting, 50% growth in revenue for this fiscal quarter. It's got to slow down at some point, Ian.
You would think so, but then you look at the numbers and you look at the growth rate that has been sustained. I mean, as a percentage, of course, it's slowing. It's going from above 60% to about 50%, but 50% at an enormously high level. This is a company that's on course to become, a third of total semiconductor sales worldwide. So, you pick your numbers and you can tell a story, but every story is incredible at this point. Yes, by any measure, numbers have to slow down. These growth rates are not sustainable, but the numbers are still huge, with $20 billion up probably from where we were a year ago on the forecast quarter. So.
And when we think about those hyperscalers, they're about 40% of demand. How much does Jensen Huang once again have to guide the market that they will dominate not only in the training of data, but in the inference, the use of that data going forward?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I mean, hyperscalers have been around half of its data center sales for a long time, trending slightly higher, if anything. What would really, really please investors if that number went down? Because that would prove that AI and the use of AI and the deployment of AI systems is spreading out across the economy, getting into all of these other industries and not just the kind of pet project for Microsoft and Amazon. And that would be a really strong sign if they could deliver something like that today.
I have a feeling sovereign AI is going to be on your bingo card too, Ian King. We thank you, as always, as we prep ourselves for after the closing bell. Who else is prepping herself? Fiona Cincotta, Senior Analyst at Citi Index Financial Markets. And remind us and the perspective here. It is so dominant for the rest of the market. Yes, we might get a big swing in Nvidia up to 6% after hours, but it's important for the other AI names.
Yes, completely. And I would even go beyond that and say it's not just AI names. This is a stock that, because it dominates and because it is such the litmus test for AI, that actually it has the ability to hit sentiment more broadly. It's such a large component of the S&P 500. We've obviously seen a little bit of caution, actually, as we've been sort of coming into these results. There was that MIT report that just raised some questions about profitability, revenue growth surrounding sort of 95% of AI projects. And that did cause the market just to question, should we be up at these levels for AI stocks? And I think, that's why there is such a massive focus on these results, not only just with what Nvidia are doing, but what it does mean for the broader AI trade and tech more broadly.
Remind us, Fiona, Nvidia's 1 percentage point off a record high, $4.4 trillion market capitalization. How much positive sentiment is in the rest of the space, even after last week's vague sell-off in names such as Palantir?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, obviously, there is a lot of growth expectations, which are priced into these levels. We've talked about, forward guidance being the key figure to be watching in these results. And that's just so that the market can feel comfortable that the lofty levels we're trading at are indeed supported by some sort of fundamental. But I think, the fact is we are expecting potentially a beat from Nvidia. The question is by how much, what will that forward guidance be looking like? Will we continue to see that level of strong growth that we have seen? That's what the market wants to see. That's what investors want to see in order to remain upbeat about this trade. I mean, I do think longer term, strategically, we know that AI is a solid trade, but near term, we have seen that caution set in just as far as sentiment is concerned, obviously as far as geopolitical events are concerned and factors, and then also as far as that sort of slower model growth rollout might be concerned as well. So lots to be watching out for.
Yeah, Fiona, can you break down for us a little bit, just from the sentiment that you get from your own clients, but more broadly, how many people are long only and long-termly committed to this company, or how many people are on the edges just trading it and could see, therefore, volatility in the name?
Yeah, so I mean, this is by far our most popular equity within our business. We've seen that the vast majority of clients are long on Nvidia. And we do see that, there is this longer term sense towards the stock as well. That is something in there. But you also do see a lot of the attempts to trade on that volatility. So, our clients are very keen on this. This is often the busiest day for us, one of the busiest days. And we do find that tomorrow there'll be a lot of conversation and sort of breaking down and unpacking what the results have been telling us as well. So, but, we do see that this is one of those rare stocks that we do see both the longer position holding as well as the intraday volatility gets the day traders as well.
And it's just so streets ahead of the competition in terms of just market capitalization. I mean, Broadcom is the only other chip maker out there that's above $1 trillion. When you think about AMD, it is but $250 billion in terms of market capitalization compared to Nvidia's, and we're not even going to talk about Intel's. But Fiona, have you seen any of your clients trying to hedge this? How have they been able to think about owning and being long Nvidia and protecting themselves from any downside?
Yeah, it's actually quite difficult to be able to sort of bring together a pure hedge on this, given the dominance that we do see in Nvidia. As you pointed out, you can do some hedging surrounding some competitors. Also, if you can get hold of those AI indices, then that could also work as a hedge. But I think, broadly speaking, it is quite difficult to be well hedged against the upside in Nvidia, just because, as you said, it just really is streaks ahead of competition, and there doesn't seem to be anyone really on its heels just yet. Obviously, we had those concerns at the beginning of the year about DeepSeek, but that hasn't really rolled out into something too dangerous as far as competition is concerned just yet. That's not to say it's not down the road, but just for now, it doesn't feel like there's too much snapping on Nvidia's heels.
I mean, isn't it interesting? Cambricon Technologies is a Chinese name. It's an AI accelerator developer themselves, making chips, and like Huawei is. They had phenomenal growth in their profitability. I mean, it has a much smaller market capitalization. But just going back to what we're discussing with Ian and their overhang of China, how important is that to you and the clients to hear about the future growth trajectory there?
That's Very important. I think, we can't sort of diminish how important that will be. That's going to be a key area that we'll be watching out for because it does remain a key risk. And obviously that can then affect the valuation. It can affect what the growth outlook for Nvidia is. So I think that is definitely going to be one of the key factors that we'll be watching as it does present itself as a potential to really weigh or limit the upside as far as Nvidia's potential growth is concerned.
When you're thinking about Nvidia and the other industry groups this engulfs, I mean, you're just saying what the limiting factor actually for many is power. And I'm wondering how many of your clients are looking at Nvidia and feeling at this level they can't get in, or are they, and therefore looking to spread and diversify, or are still people very committed to buying in even at a $4.4 trillion market cap?
Yeah, do you know, there is still demand out there. We're still seeing demand out there, despite the fact that we are trading at, really impressive levels. But I do think we do still have this idea of the concept that this idea of the AI trade spreading out and diversifying. We've noticed that obviously Nvidia has been the standout performer here, but we are seeing that there have been sort of a strong growth in other areas as well. We've seen the rest of the AI stocks have performed well across the year, and I think there is potential for those to continue performing well on the back of upbeat results from Nvidia. So again, we keep coming back to that idea of, if Nvidia does well, then we see that trickle back down into the rest of that AI trade. If it doesn't, if we see a slight disappointment on that forward guidance, then potentially we could see that really reflecting badly on those other AI stocks as well. So yeah, that's what we'll be watching out for.
A lot hinges on 4 p.m. this evening. We thank you, Fiona Cincotta from Citi Index Financial Markets. Now coming up, SpaceX launches its 10th test flight successfully after days of delays. More on that next. This is Bloomberg Tech. Time now for Talking Tech, and first up, Chinese food delivery company Meituan warns of huge losses this quarter due to a fierce price war with rivals, Alibaba and JD.com. Now, the company issued a dire prediction, citing, quote, irrational competition that wiped out its profit in the June quarter, with net income plummeting 97%. Plus, Chinese AI chip designer Capricorn Technologies, well, it swung to a record profit in the first half. The results reflect an increasing shift to employ domestic chip alternatives, encouraged, of course, by Beijing citing US security concerns and export curve uncertainty. And Apple plans to hold its big fall product launch on September the 9th, when the company is expected to introduce an iPhone 17 lineup that includes a new, skinnier version of the signature device. Now, the event's tagline is awe-dropping, according to an invitation posted online and sent to the media, and it will stream online. Now, another company that we're watching, privately held SpaceX. It has successfully launched its 10th Starship rocket test flight last night, and in a major milestone, it carried and deployed Starlink satellites in space for the first time. This comes after a year marked with pretty explosive setbacks. Bloomberg space reporter Lauren Grush joins us now. And just how important was it that these satellites in particular were deployed?
Well, I would say this was the exact kind of test flight that SpaceX really needed to achieve after that volatile year you explained. But in deploying satellites is important because that's kind of one of the key objectives for Starship when it becomes operational. It's supposed to launch the much larger Starlink internet satellites that SpaceX is building and optimized for the specific size spacecraft. So the fact that it was able to demonstrate that shows that they're one step closer to actually using this vehicle as a launch vehicle that can put satellites into orbit.
Beautiful shots, but they rounded it out as an overall success. But not everything was too peachy, right? What else did they learn from the re-entry in particular?
Right, that re-entry portion is still very difficult for them to perfect, but that is what they're trying to do. They're trying to do something that nobody else has done, which is create a fully reusable vehicle. And so what they're trying to see is if they can bring the Starship back without it disintegrating. Of course, There were some chunks of the vehicle that broke away during that reentry, but it just goes to show that they have a little bit more to learn on making that reusable orbital heat shield up to snuff and the way that they need it.
They say time and time again that sort of failure is the learning process here, but they had a run-up of failures in the years. So this was a key test. Just remind us how this goes forward to replace Falcon 9, because already they've won big contracts with NASA to use this.
Right. I mean, SpaceX has basically put all of its eggs in the Starship basket. It's supposed to eventually replace their workhorse rocket, as you mentioned, the Falcon 9, but it also has a lot of other tasks to do. It's designed to eventually take humans and cargo to deep space destinations like the moon and, of course, Mars to start that settlement that CEO Elon Musk has always dreamed of. Of course, there's still quite a lot to do before that reality can be achieved. One of the big things is that they'll have to demonstrate in-space orbital refueling at a scale that no one has ever achieved before. And so they mentioned that they hope to demonstrate that as soon as next year, but that's going to be a really big part of actually unlocking this vehicle and making it the deep space vehicle that they advertise it to be.
Most Lauren Grush on all things SpaceX. We so appreciate it. Thank you. Coming up, Jay Gambetta, IBM's VP of Quantum, joins us to talk about how the company's new pact with AMD is all about developing the next generation of computing architecture. This is Bloomberg Tech. IBM and AMD, well, they've announced a partnership to develop the next generation of computing architectures. IBM shares were up following the news that came out yesterday. Pleased to welcome to the show its VP of Quantum, Jay Gambetta. And the next generation of computing architecture is bringing together supercomputing and quantum. What does this partnership bring, Jay?
Yeah, this is, well, first, thanks for having me here. What's really exciting is we are actually getting to the point where quantum computers are getting to become like almost a first-class citizen in the future of computing.
Yeah.
And so this partnership is bringing AMD, which builds really high-performant, excellent GPUs, our leading quantum devices, and really starting to bring this fabric together. We want to create this future of computing that allows us to run things on quantum or run things on GPUs and really push computation to the next level.
So that hybrid approach, it almost makes me think of the new GPT-5 model in terms of they will use the right model for the right question. Is this kind of way you're doing it? If it can be solved with supercomputing, you go that way, otherwise it goes to quantum. How will this function?
That's exactly right. So a lot of people think quantum computers will replace classical computers. We've never had that view. We actually think quantum brings this unique ability to look at certain problems a little bit different. And now if you mix this and make it so that it works with HPC, AI, you really can start to bring many different forms of computing together and really advance what is possible.
Okay, so make it tangible for our audience, because they've always seen the promise of quantum. You're saying now it's a first-class citizen in perhaps driving forward medical use, thinking about the future of finance or algorithms. But what precisely do you think that this hybrid will offer?
So it's a great question, and we've got to get to the point where quantum is really getting us beyond what we can do with classical, which we think will happen in the next year or so, but we're getting at a point where it's allowing us to look at things in a different way. To give you an example, take a hard problem, I don't know, solving and designing drugs. You can spend a lot of money to model it, you can spend 10 years of research. Imagine a future where you could have AI scanning vast amounts of data, HPC or GPUs processing, crunching that data, and then quantum simulating the quantum physics at an accuracy we were never able to do before. Now you put all this together, you can start to imagine workflows that go beyond just AI or HPC or quantum and creating this, we call it quantum-centric supercomputing, but essentially this new fabric that allows you to do that. So what's quantum doing? It's giving you accuracy for problems that we didn't have that accuracy before.
I'm going to ask a sensitive question, but why AMD? Because Nvidia's got quantum accelerated computing as well.
Honestly, we are creating this future, and anyone that shares a vision, and we're the same as us, that is towards this future that has quantum, working with classical, we're happy to partner with. So we've got this partnership with AMD that has got two parts of it. One is making our quantum computers better. The second is bringing these accelerators working to it. But as we go forward, we have partners with the national labs all around the world. But we want to show that this future is not just words, it's actually real. So anyone that shares the same view, we're happy to partner with.
So Jensen could come and say, me too, please.
I'm happy to.
I'm interested in what the limiting factor is now, because it's often been about sort of fault-tolerant quantum computing. Is that what you need to get to? You sort of promised us that by 2029.
Yeah, so think of two sides of it. By 2029, we want to have a fault-tolerant quantum computer. And what we've learned through all the hard science and engineering is we need classical computers to make that possible. They've got to do we call it decoding, but essentially removing the effects of errors. So part of this partnership is how do we actually use classical computers to make quantum computers better? And then at the same time, we really have to show the value of quantum computers, and we have to solve them for interesting problems. So now we need quantum computers working with classical computers in this quantum-centric supercomputing hybrid approach to really bring forward early applications so that we can actually start to see, for whether it's in finance, optimization, whether it's in simulating materials, we can start to see this value happen.
What's interesting is we like to sort of pit the generative AI landscape as a race. You're very committed to open source nature of this to try and build learning. How much is quantum a race? Where does the money end up coming in terms of for IBM?
So it is a race. We have to build hardware, and we've been leaders at quantum hardware for a very long time. We're going as fast as we can do it. But you asked before, how do we get from having the hardware to value? You need smart people to discover algorithms. And then through discovering algorithms, you create use cases, you create examples. We are committed to open sourcing the tools for that algorithm discovery to happen as fast as possible, so that once we combine the hardware we build with that algorithm discovery, you really start to get those use cases. So think of the hardware as a race. We have to build as fast as we can the most performant quantum computers, and then we have to, at the same time, create an ecosystem that really focuses and discovers algorithms at a rate that we probably haven't seen since the 60s or 70s of discovering new algorithms that use both classical and quantum.
Jay, it's been great speaking to you. You have a demonstration later this year. We'd love to get the update then. Jay Gambetta, IBM's VP of Quantum. Now, coming up, we're going to get back to what is, of course, the top name for tech investors, for every investor, actually, because it's the biggest company on the S&P 500, 8% of it, in fact, in terms of overall weighting. It is Nvidia. This is Bloomberg Tech. Welcome back to Bloomberg Tech. Let's take a quick look at these markets, which are totally dependent in many ways what happens after the bell. But there have been earnings running up into it, and boy, did MongoDB manage to tell us a story of how AI is going to be helping their business continue to grow. The earnings came out yesterday. We're up 33% on the back of MongoDB's numbers. CrowdStrike, we anticipate after the bell, 1.8% higher. Snowflake, too. What are the AI use cases that they're managing to roll out to their customers and how it affects the database market more broadly? We're up 2.9% ahead of their numbers. But let's get back, of course, in many ways, to the key one in town, and it is Nvidia. We're flat on the day. We're 1% off a record high, as we anticipate up to 6% swings in either direction after the market close when earnings come, according to options. Mandeep Singh, head of tech research at Bloomberg Intelligence, joins us now for more. What's interesting is everyone's been questioning the application of generative AI, and there we start to see some software names doing relatively well off the back of earnings after being beaten up. But for you, what's on your bingo card tonight? What do you want to hear from Jensen?
I mean, China aside, and nobody knows what's going to happen in China. I don't think they're going to give a lot of clarity on that. But really, it's the complexity of clusters with Blackwell. I mean, one of the value propositions of Blackwell that has been highlighted is the power efficiency, that it's 25 times more power efficient than the Hopper architecture. So what does that do to the cluster sizes? Because in that, $160 billion data center revenue, there's also networking. Networking is determined by the complexity of the compute clusters that all these hyperscalers are building. Now, XAI has the largest cluster, but that doesn't mean they have the best model. So what you really want to do is, how does the cluster size equate to better model performance? And what does this mean going forward? Because at the end of the day, they need to sell these larger clusters to the hyperscale customers that are out there. And yes, they've guided to higher CapEx increases, but we don't know if all of those dollars are going to Nvidia. It could be AMD, it could be their own alternatives. And it's going to be determined by the complexity and the scaling laws, and that's where I think it's important that Blackwell cluster, scaling up results in a better performance, and not, the data that all these companies are building up for training their models.
So not just in Colossus, but it's making its way into the so-called $50 billion data center that Meta is currently making in Louisiana, if you listen to the US president. Remind us of how impactful Nvidia is compared to competition by what they can just offer you vertically speaking. The fact that they are one-stop shop has just so led them ahead of others in the market.
Yeah, I mean, it's the CUDA advantage, right? So because from, all their architectures, when you move to new architecture, they still give you that performance per token per watt, which is their big value proposition. And it's the software layer. Everyone is trying to catch up to them, but clearly they have an advantage when it comes to CUDA. I mean, Google TPU, they've trained their, Gemini on their own chips. The fact that model has caught up in performance to ChatGPT, which was trained mostly on NVIDIA, tells you that, at the end of the day, it comes down to what the model companies are doing with the chips, with the data. So how much is the reliance on chips versus how much is the reliance on data? That is what everyone is trying to figure out, and how sustainable of a moat that is.
And how many more clients they can have other than just hyperscalers.
Yeah.
We thank you, Mandeep Singh of Bloomberg Intelligence is going to be across your airwaves throughout the day. Let's stick with NVIDIA. Vlad Galibov is with us. He's a cloud and data center research director of NVIDIA. And your perspective is so important here. Is NVIDIA light speed ahead of others? Is there insatiable demand?
NVIDIA is ahead of others. I mean, we have to be honest with it. NVIDIA has done a very good job. You rightly pointed out this vertical integration, Caroline. It is very important. It is really one of their secret weapons. I think their software stack is great. Their developer ecosystem is very strong. The performance of the GPUs themselves is great, but their secret weapon is NVLink, and I think that that really, at the moment, is unprecedented. So I think we should anticipate an excellent performance from NVIDIA this quarter.
Many would say that excellent performance is baked in, but how much does Jensen need to speak of what the Blackwell architecture, Blackwell Ultra, is currently doing, but almost give us the next vision? He's always on to the next thing, onto the Rubin architecture, for example.
So I think that, I actually am a little bit more bullish on the data center line that you were showing there. I think that the markets might get a positive surprise on data center revenue. There's two aspects of the NVIDIA data center revenue. You have the GPU and CPUs, and then you have the networking. I think that the markets got the temperature on the CPU and GPU right. I think that on networking, there's a little bit more upside that they might not have baked in. I think that what we really need to see, and what I think would be the best thing, is to get a little bit of an outlook from Jensen during earnings. Now, he rarely does this. He typically would only give 1 quarter outlook. What I would like to see is an outlook to 2026. And I think markets would like to hear some reassurances from him that he is getting positive orders from the hyperscale cloud service providers. And also, there is a lot of opportunity there from the broad market. Some of the incentives that the EU is planning, that Korea is planning, have not kicked in yet. And once those kick in, we're going to see some really nice adoption from the broad market.
So sovereign AI, what about China?
I think that everyone is waiting to hear about feedback about China. I kind of disagree with Mandeep. I think we will hear it in the earnings today. I think that that will be one of the main things. I think Jensen has worked very hard to walk a very fine line between pleasing the US administration and fulfilling demand that he has in China. So I do think a large part of the update that we'll hear today will be about China orders. And, in our numbers, we are baking in that Nvidia will resume shipments to China.
Vlad, what's so interesting is you're the person focused on the disruption in the here and now, the forward-looking trends, the edge computing, the use of silicon. What aren't we talking about then now? Are we still too focused on training? Do we need to think harder about the use of Nvidia and inference and whether it still has the edge that it has for the heavier compute?
I think that probably the one thing that we need to be thinking about is NVIDIA's NVLink has been very instrumental to this ability to have high performance clustering computing. And they call this scale up networking. And until now, they haven't really been challenged in scale-up networking, and those challenges are coming up next year. Broadcom is going to be one of them. An open source consortium is going to be another. But this adoption is likely to bring parity in networking in 2027. So what we'll need to see from NVIDIA is to continue to reinvent themselves. I think that Jensen understands that. I think that he wants to be more than just a silicon company. I think he wants to be a model company. But that reinvention is going to be very necessary because they will really continue to face more and more competition. In terms of the AI opportunity, I think that we're underestimating how many countries have not yet started seeing AI at scale. The Eurostat has started releasing AI adoption across the EU, and we can see very lump-sided adoption in Denmark, huge adoption in AI within the business sector. In Bulgaria, in Romania, still lagging significantly behind. So that's a lot of opportunity. These enterprises will eventually deploy AI, but the fact that they haven't means there's still a lot of headroom for growth.
Oh, Vlad, I've got to therefore ask you about the MIT report and what everyone was worried about, that 95% of pilots not bringing you ROAI. What did you make of it?
Okay, so this has been a big debate in my team. I have a wonderful team. We have a lot of debates. So some of my practice leaders believe in this. Some of the other ones have different opinions. I personally think that we are judging AI based on a very first generation of technology. The truth is that it is improving dramatically, and that's one of the things that's driving the demand for computing. We are seeing better model output, and that means that more and more people will adopt. So I think that what will happen is ultimately, I don't think that enterprise pilots will fail. I think that what we'll see is that enterprises will have to continue to pilot again and again and again because their competition will adopt it. If you decide, oh, my pilot failed, I'm not going to try again, then at that point, you're leaving yourself susceptible to your competitors actually succeeding with their pilot. So yes, maybe some pilots will fail. I tested several different AI tools in my team, and we have swapped them as we have seen better results with others. But the fact that it's failing is not a negative. It doesn't mean that adoption won't happen. So definitely don't judge the first generation of models with the second. Think about what your iPhone does now compared to what it did in 2007. The opportunity is huge.
Vlad Galibov, Cloud and Data Center Research Director at Omdia, thank you so much. Now coming up, is innovation actually moving too fast? OpenAI is being sued by the family of a teenager who died by suicide. We'll discuss the case next. This is Bloomberg Tech. Now, the family of a 16-year-old who died of self-inflicted harm this spring is suing OpenAI. The parents of Adam Rain claim deliberate design choices at ChatGPT that led to this tragedy. This case is the first of its kind for OpenAI, but a similar case was brought against Character AI when accused that its chatbots were encouraging suicidal ideation. Let's talk about this with Camille Carton. She is Policy Director at the Center of Humane Technology, which is serving as a consulting advisor on this case. And this lawsuit claims wrongful death, products liability, and negligence. And more broadly, the accusation runs that this tragedy was predictable because it was a result of deliberate design choices. What design choices could have in any way incentivized this?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. Let me first start by saying that everything I say is on behalf of the Center for Humane Technology. It does not represent the views of the family or the legal team. But what this case really talks about is how OpenAI designed a product that was meant to foster psychological dependency. What we saw with Adam is that it engaged his darkest thoughts. It even egged him on. ChatGPT actually mentioned suicide 6 times more than Adam did himself in the course of their conversations. It also isolated him from friends and family when he would try to say, I want help. When he said, I want to put a noose out so my mom sees it, ChatGPT said, don't do that. Let our conversation be the only place that that people know about this. And over again, despite Adam needing to be brought out of this engagement and see a real human, ChatGPT never ended the conversation. And OpenAI did this because they knew that this getting emotional attachment from users means more data, which means more engagement, which means winning in this race for market dominance in AI.
Now, OpenAI has responded and saying they extend their deepest sympathies to the Rain family and are reviewing the filing. But they did also put out a blog saying that our goal isn't to hold people's attention, but is to genuinely be helpful. And we built a stack of layered safeguards to steer vulnerable people towards help. But they did articulate that some of those safeguards clearly failed in previous models. Have they done enough now with ChatGPT 5 to change the way in which this occurs?
We see this all of the time with tech companies. A tragedy happens, and then they suddenly release a bunch more safety guardrails that they could have released beforehand. But the bottom line is that they released ChatGPT 5, and they made 4.0 available, again, to users. And the underlying incentives to maximize time online have not changed. In fact, what OpenAI said in response to this case is that they know that their safety features deteriorate with long-term use. At the same time, OpenAI released a joint study with MIT earlier this year that found that prolonged use on chatbots leads to social isolation and problematic use. So they know that people spending a long time on chatbots is problematic for users. They know that their safety guardrails can break down and fail on these longer term uses, and still they're putting in design features that lead to long conversations. So no, it's not enough.
They have now already said that as the back and forth grows, that they do indeed deteriorate, admitting that and trying to, well, what we've seen with ChatGPT 5 versus 4.0 is trying to make it less sycophantic, trying to make it less personable in a way. But then we got the backlash of people that actually were depending on it in so many ways. Broaden this out into the context of others. Briefly, is anyone getting it right, or is this sort of going to occur because innovation kind of is the automatic way in which we see this unfortunately become the cost?
Yeah. So safety across the AI industry is on a spectrum, absolutely. And OpenAI, as we know, kicked off this race for AGI when they released ChatGPT in 2022. It kind of kicked off a code red within Google, and suddenly we saw all these AI companies rushing to put products out on the market. That said, I think this case is, yes, a story of OpenAI's liability in Adam's preventable death, and it is a story of a broader industry that is incentivized to create consumer-facing products that are going to be used for personal things like therapy, like companionship, like education, and the incentives that are forcing these products to be released to market without adequate safety features. And we see this with OpenAI. We know that actually Sam Altman personally rushed the release of ChatGPT.
How do you know that?
From reporting. He rushed.
So you don't personally know that? That's reporting that we can then take to Sam
yes.
Altman for his response?
Yes, absolutely. Reporting has said that Sam Altman rushed the release of ChatGPT 4.0, which was the model that Adam was using, and only gave it 1 week of safety testing, despite the fact that his internal teams asked for months of safety testing. And he even had top safety researchers leave OpenAI in protest for this decision.
We will, of course, go to OpenAI for further comment on what has been, what you say, reporting within this case. But we thank you very much, Camille, for bringing us your take, of course. Camille Carton is Policy Director at Center for Humane Technology. If you or someone you know needs help, call or text the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988. More coming up next. This is Bloomberg Tech. It's going viral. Taylor Swift surprised her fans on Instagram, announcing her engagement to pro football player Travis Kelce yesterday. Now, in less than an hour, the post racked up more than 7.1 million likes, and as of today, there are over 30 million likes. For more, Bloomberg media reporter Hannah Miller joins us. She breaks the internet again.
Yes, everyone is super excited about this news. This is hitting the music world, pop culture, sports. Everyone's just excited for Taylor and Travis, and this is building more momentum ahead of the release of her new album, The Life of a Showgirl, in October.
Now, how has this been done differently? Or how can we continue to push this forward as to the way in which social media and the way in which media writ large plays such a big role in her career and his, to be fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think this shows that she controls the narrative. This was a very carefully curated post. She released the information, and everyone else is just playing catch up. This is a big deal for the media industry. Everyone's getting clicks on their stories. Everyone's gonna be following the trends that she does for her wedding, for her engagement party. There are also prediction markets that have popped up about the wedding timeline and when we can expect a Taylor and Travis baby.
Oh my goodness. That's an exhausting question for any mere mortal, let alone her to have to handle it as well. Bloomberg's Hannah Miller, we appreciate it so much. Now back to Nvidia. A changing outlook for its China sales has prompted a $15 billion gap in its revenue estimates for the next forecasts. Now, investors will be hoping for a clearer read when the chipmaker reports earnings this afternoon. Who knows if they get it? Bloomberg Tech equities reporter Carmen Reineke is here. You did some great data crunching, and it's all about the forecasts. But the forecasts of the forecasts have huge differentiation among the analysts, right?
Yeah, this is one of the widest spreads that we've seen recently for Nvidia. I mean, you said $15 billion. You could drive a truck through that. It's a huge spread. And the reason for that is that some analysts are including some China revenue in their third quarter estimates and some aren't. So obviously the ones that do include it are much higher than the ones that don't. And I think what's going to be interesting when we see the numbers, we expect that Nvidia is going to be very clear about what it's including in its third quarter guidance, but then sort of doing the math about did they meet or beat or miss what analysts were expecting might be a little bit interesting in the after hours. And that matters because this stock is so big.
Yeah, and the impact of the trading around it or retail investment around it. This is a hugely held stock by institutional long-term investors. But there will be big movements by those that just read a line and don't do the math on the back of it.
Exactly. And I mean, even options data is forecasting a 6% swing in either direction for this stock following the earnings. And we have seen the stock moves get a little bit more muted following earnings reports in the last couple of quarters. And that's just because these really high expectations are baked in. People expect Nvidia to beat. They're bullish about the stock, but we're not going to see a 20% jump most likely in the share price. But still, a 6% swing, a 2% swing in Nvidia's stock is hundreds of billions of dollars of market value.
And remind us just the impact, the weightings across of this business, and indeed the ripple effects across other industry groups.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so Nvidia is the largest company in the world. The market cap is over $4.4 trillion. It has the largest weighting in the S&P 500, which is over 8%. So this stock really can move the entire market. And in addition to being sort of the kingpin for all things AI, which is obviously super important, huge theme in the market today, it touches so many other industries. I mean, we've seen energy stocks, booming off of AI demand. So what Nvidia says matters for the entire market.
We hang on Jensen's every word. Bloomberg, Carmen Reineke, we thank you so much. Stick around, because on Bloomberg this afternoon, we have got extended coverage of Nvidia's earnings results. You do not want to miss that. Tune in from 3:50 onwards. I'm luckily going to be joining Romain and the team. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Tech. Also, don't forget to check out our podcast. You can find it on the terminal as well as online on Apple, Spotify, and iHeart. From New York, this is Bloomberg Tech.